Michael Tyrell is the author of The Wanted, National Poetry Review 2012, and Phantom Laundry, Backlash 2017. He also edited Broken Land, Poems of Brooklyn from NYU Press in 2007. His poems have appeared widely in Agni, the Best American Poetry, the Iowa Review, the Paris Review, Plowshares, the Yale Review, and many other publications. He is a native of Brooklyn and teaches at NYU. Comprised of poetry written over the course of more than 2 decades, The Arsonist Letters reckons with a radically changing landscape where infestations of coincidence overlap with reflective tricks and rungless ladders, and increased surveillance meets the threat of looming extinction. Throughout, memorable historical and contemporary figures emerge: a cousin mistaken for the abducted Lindbergh child, a boy who must make a bargain to keep from starving in Mussolini's Italy, children who swear live inside them the entire populations of small countries, including moving elegies for a dying mother and poems that puzzle over different family secrets. The collection also stands as a paean to correspondence itself, celebrating not only the near lost art of letter writing, but the spiritual necessity of the written message. Quote, "You carry an unsent card in your coat like immunity papers from one ruined place to another, where it is, at least somehow, always spring." The best analysis I have seen so far of Michael's work is by Hudson Valley Writers Center teacher and friend Philip F. Clark, who writes, "The best poems make us physically react, raise our temperature, raise the hair on our neck, make us rethink experience of both the body and the mind. They become scalpels in the best hands of a diagnostic craftsman of words." Michael Tyrell's newest collection, spanning over 2 decades of incisive, tender, and searing cognition, do all of this and more. Please help me welcome Michael.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jenny and Sophia. It's such an honor to read with Richie and Ananda. And I'm just so grateful to be here, even virtually at the Hudson Valley Writers Center. It's just an honor to be in this stellar company. And thank you, Philip Clark, for that great blurb that you wrote about my book. I really appreciate that. I wanted to say just a few words about the book that I'm reading from. I guess it's sort of important for me to say that written correspondence has always felt like a source, not only of a kind of a complicated family history, but also a form of poetry. I was raised by a single mother from Brooklyn who used letters whenever she wanted to communicate an unbroken thought, not quite suitable or too long to be affordable on the telephone. So serious news, jokes, a kind of poetry got shared, everything but gossip. Never write anything down that you don't want to come back to haunt you as a lesson I should have learned better from her. And when I started writing poems, I usually wrote to specific people, some of whom I never had a chance to meet. But these weren't exactly epistolary poems. But over time, I began to think of poetry almost as a way of writing unsent letters. And more years ago than I'd like to count, when I began writing poems that seemed to not fit into the manuscripts I was working on at the time, I began sort of putting them aside. And only recently, over the past couple of years, began seeing that so many of the poems had not only to do with writing letters, but also with kind of collecting the evidence of a life, almost like what you'd put in a time capsule. And I'd like to dedicate this reading to the memory of my mother, who died in late 2020. She was a bit camera shy, but there are two photos of her on the jacket of my book. And there's actually one right behind me, if you can see her. She's hiding behind a skylight in a roof in Brooklyn in 1950. And if you look on the back, she's the dolled up child proudly riding her bike. So this first poem is called Birthday, Anniversary, Sympathy Blank. And it was inspired by a sign that I saw at a bookstore advertising a greeting card section, birthday, anniversary, sympathy blank. And when I saw that, it seemed to me like such a poignant summary of a human lifespan, And there's an epigraph by Laurie Moore at the beginning, and there's a reference at the end to Abigail Folger, who was an heiress who died in 1969, who somehow managed to keep getting invitations to department stores and parties. I mean, her life lived on, her posthumous life lived on, so she kept getting invitations. So this is Birthday, Anniversary, Sympathy Blank, and the epigraph is by Laurie Moore from her story, You're Ugly Too. She thought of zoos in parks, how when cities were under siege during world wars, people ate the animals. I go to market to buy every card I can think of, but they are out. The racks are empty and I can't help picturing a vacant zoo because the animals are eaten, because there's a war on, and why people say abattoir when they really mean slaughterhouse. The clerk informs me, we're not making cards anymore. From now on, it will be only singing microchips and hologram cakes, a sexy dream downloaded into the brain the evening before a big day. My order would be too late anyway. It is your birthday and they have you in intensive care in the unit, a semi-private. You think that sounds military and erotic? Are you sure there are no cards left? I'll check, the clerk says, pickle-faced, slithering down his corridor of monitors. A woman on one console goes on and on about satellites, how every satellite has a pulse, and itinerants from other planets, if they have hearts, will know what we are, what substance is beating or brooking or conspiring against us. Birthday, anniversary, sympathy, blank. I can't ever pretend to browse, but I somehow like the wall murals, the idealized George Eliot and her self-possessed smirk. I can't remember a word from her novels. Have I finished any of them? Here I am somewhere between Adam Bede and Daniel Deronda. And it's your birthday and intensive care has you. You are expiring and by now you are expired. I'll have to redirect the subscriptions and collect the insurance, delete you from my database, laser out the tattoo, scribble the obit, hot the pot boilers with your name in them, white out the embarrassing marginalia, suck dry the account, dishonor the ticket, unearth the certificate, permanently pull the phone like a bad tooth, chip down the initialed box elder, edit all anecdotes to the past tense, chuck the leftover tangelos, let the koi back into the pond, dump your cacti, scissor your documents because the shredder's broken, let your memoirs fall into the bathwater so no one can read them, think up replies to insults I could never answer, donate your gabardines, find significance in our ultimate exchanges, appease your creditors, and saw the futon in half. There's always the risk of an invitation finding its way to you, not unlike the poor dead coffee heiress who got one decades later. The naked guy sprints around the store, a rabid mongrel loose in a Vatican. Those who make us secure will arrive before my clerk. If someone naked were arrested now, would you laugh? I'm not sure you would stick around for it to happen. You never cared for surprises. And it's true, surprise parties were never a surprise to you. You preferred saying, I was invited instead of alive. So this next poem was published in the Night Heron Barks, which is a really great journal that I want to kind of just plug. I'm sure most of you know it. Rogan Kelly, Philip Clark, great journal. And this is called Mermaid. Mermaid. I knew it was too quick, the rocks seemed to say. Her old drowning phobia. She doesn't want to leave the world to be a fish again. But pain strands her, another crag. It also gives her a view of her birthplace. I left it too and won't be forgiven. But it's not absolution I'm seeking. There's a transformation I've not yet done myself. Listen, I say, you're multiple, powerful. You carried the salt all along. It's the unresurrected who need to worry. Like garden slugs, we leave our light everywhere. So those are just a couple, and one more newer poem. It's these are kind of shorter poems that I've been writing lately, and this one is called Earth. You brought me here. I should have been able to save you. More earth now. You're portable, sifted, not as dandelion as I hoped. Needle's eye I can't clear in any light whose point still draws red. It's better, you explained, if they walk on me by the Empire, the willow in Transmitter Park. Look at these stones unvisited in any weather, but about the dust, mostly right. If you're lucky, you can turn them into a few words. Luckier still, dreams. Okay, so the next poem is called Nixon. And I guess you should know a little bit that my mother was an unwed mother, a single parent, long before it was fashionable. And, she gave birth to my brother when she was 19. She gave birth to me when she was 42. And there was, a tremendous amount of gossip. So I guess I knew kind of how to make an entrance in the world, kind of a scandal. This is Nixon. I was born the summer of his disgrace. That's always been my claim. And it's a trait I despise in other people, hitching the intensely personal to the historical, making Watergate a lame pun for passage and delivery. But my mother insists on scandal. An unmarried mother, middle-aged, she swears her pregnancy didn't show. Even that morning, she locked herself in the toilet and told her own mother to call an ambulance. The phones rang off the hook that day, everyone in the family. If I wanted to carry this further, I could point out my mother, like Nixon, could have resigned. A childless cousin wanted to raise me, a maternal version of a vice president. But my mother, a child of Roosevelt, kept me. 4 terms of depression and world war. Like all children, I demanded a recount, a new election. Request denied. Hostage faces bubbled on the television screen. When she told me who my father was, I wanted the mystery back. The speculation traded like missiles between the family gossips, not a Woodward or Bernstein among them. Deep Throat, a man on the street they couldn't identify, who never spoke to them. Okay, so this next poem is called All the Unreal Animals, and it's a kind of a dream poem with an imaginary or an unreal animal called the Larry. All the unreal animals. Larrys emerge in October, annuals like mayflies that come out in June, or groundhogs afraid of their own shadows. The running out of chlorophyll is a music they can hear that draws them from their terminal burrows, more than the fires licking over the wooden giraffes that have the memories of elephants when it comes to their early colors they wore. And the Larrys, when they see this, begin paradoxically undressing like hypothermia victims. Off come the layers as from onions or garter snakes. And under the hot moon, they look for marriage, their compound eyes a lightning bug code, lasers in the places where night makes capsules where every Larry lies waiting, convinced because all the other Larrys look alike, he's being deceived. A world of reflective tricks and rungless ladders, and only in sleep, a dream being had before the relentless color is turned back on. In the moment, a human snips an aberrant thread from the layers of hair, as though a tail grew on her head overnight. The Larry's extinction alarm clock dies and mating's done. Love is the thing you and the Larry see almost once and never again. And another human, I saw him on the train early tonight, twisting his wedding band like a cap from a jug of acidy wine to the tip of his finger, but not quite fully off. He twisted the such and such carrot knot. And because it was November when we got off the train, and I let the crowd take him from me, I knew it was over again. The chance to ask a species, what does it call God? And in all the streets, not a Larry to be found. This next poem is called Hemingway, and it quotes some lines from Hills Like White Elephants. And it also references the famous ghost ship, the Mary Celeste. Hemingway. In Genoa, city where the Mary Celeste never arrives every day, the hour to become a ghost isn't necessarily noon. It's when the young American student named Hemingway reads in the plaza the collected stories of her namesake, reads the story of the White Elephant Hills again, the story of the bickering lovers who say, please, please, please. If only they can keep the child out of their words, it will never be born. The hills along the Ebro like skin through a fire screen of trees. Our itinerary claims a stop, a return. It's the vessels we have to trust, the vessels always blameless, like the Mary Celeste, amber alcohol lozenges cached below deck. It's investigators whose verdict said mutiny, fever ship. Please, 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 we've said to each other, please stop the tiff, prolong the delirious thrust. Your carry-on you forgot at the Nice railway must be in Firenze now. Somewhere on the train here, the languages changed and the ocean changed its sex. I think you want me to be a character from another story, someone who goes missing and can be suitably mourned. But the hills in Genoa look too green to be elephants. It's like Papa's writing this in the wrong universe, no child to argue about. And the future, as always, a ghost ship. We can board it only when we've shed some mutinous skins. La mer becoming il mare. Okay, so a couple more. This one is called Wormhole, and it was written in December 2016, so a month after the election. Wormhole. So far, it's like any reality, scanty foreshadowing, infestations of coincidence. The Magi enter in sidewalk murals, seldom in the flesh on sidewalk. Waiting not the story the map tells. If the bus is symbolic, it is not clear where we are in the plot, whether the action is rising or we've swerved into a subplot. I don't see any face I can't fathom not meeting in some waiting room or other. There's a lottery here like anywhere. We must scratch and scratch to make our nails metallic black, and rules about doubles abound should we encounter them. There are ropes to know. Who knows, we might turn out to be the ghosts in this story, though the budget won't accommodate sci-fi monsters to wolf the city down. Inconsequential light through dirty windows touches the faces of the riders facing west. Only one glances up, baffled and attentive, like one reading Plato for the first time. Nothing, not shadow, and she can't stomach another illusion. And wanted to read one that was written during the pandemic. It's called To Have Them. It has an epigraph by Sylvia Plath. It's even my beloved bees set upon me today when I numbly knocked aside their sugar feeder, and I am all over stings. Sylvia Plath in a letter to a mother, October 1962. 1 week into lockdown, the dogwoods flowering look more foam than flower. Flowers at the ground and in branches, a white at the lips like a first symptom. A stillness as in post-seizure. Maybe a first symptom noticing, like losing smell, shedding the taste buds, the tongue's scant flowers. How many of us flowering now insignificantly, not noticeably? Faces and boxes on the phone and faces beaming through screens in Lombardy. And still it's spring like the sum of many previous springs, the outside, what you can remember, not the hours at home, the beloved bees you can't see in the rain, all along building and dismantling the flowers, the sirens and the mourning doves, like the mask and the rubber gloves, like the sum of springs, like noticing, like I am all over stings. I go outside, I put each of them on, against all sense, wanting skin against skin again, more than the words and the masks and the gloves, for someone in the world to topple me, take them off me, to have to touch me, talk to me to have them. And one last poem. It's called Wound Care. Not even the dresser-topped saints can see how you unbutton your shirt tonight to show me the ghost of a zipper the sawbones left, taking back their staples. All your summer, the taking out, sherd by sherd, a kind of dig, the slug he left you with, the rent-a-cop gunning for his baby mama who caught you by mistake. Pizza parlor aprons they dropped over you, all the tattoos coming up roses that night, and then your other blood, their luggage, the forgiveness from those who once said, we don't own you, you are dissed, you are not owned, who didn't say the wounded somehow are easiest reclaimed. The saints they brought you collapsed into wooden dolls who can't see, having been turned to face the wall above the bed. And like another kind of sniper, I'm above you lying down, all our wearable ammunition unloaded, if not glittering, still warm, when you say, scar gonna fade quicker, when you say, shoot here. Thank you very much.
That was so gorgeous, Michael. Thank you so much. And don't forget, everyone, to get Michael's book. It is available now after a little glitch, so you can order it. And when you see Michael in person, he will sign it for you. Don't forget that this has been a hard time for poets to launch their books, and this book was written over a couple of decades. So please give it some love. And you've heard how great the poems are. So definitely put this on your list. And poetry books also, don't forget, make really good Valentine's Day presents. Okay, so now, thank you, Michael, again for that reading. Now we have Ananda Lima. She is the author of Motherland from Black Lawrence Press, which came out in 2021. It was the winner of the Hudson Prize, shortlisted for the Chicago Review of Books Awards. She's also the author of 4 chapbooks. And she is, her work has appeared in American Poetry Review, poets.org, Kenyon Review Online, Gulf Coast, Colorado Review, Poetry Northwest, Pleiades, and elsewhere. She has served as the poetry judge for the AWP Kurt Brown Prize, as staff at the Sewanee Writers Conference, and as a mentor at the NIFA Immigrant Artist Program. She has been awarded the inaugural Work in Progress Fellowship by Latinx in Publishing and sponsored by Macmillan Publishers. She has also been awarded an award for her fiction manuscript In Progress. She has an MA in linguistics from UCLA and an MFA in creative writing and fiction from Rutgers. Motherland is focused on the intersection of motherhood and immigration and its effect on a speaker's relationship to place, others, and self. It investigates the mutual and compounding complications of these shifts in identity while examining legacy, history, ancestry, land, home, and language. As Angela Maria Spring writes in Electric Literature, interrogating the liminal space of place as both mother and immigrant, Lima's poems are full of the longings and confusions of mentally existing in two countries at once. This book was featured in Poets and Writers, page 1, where new and noteworthy books begin. It was featured in New Confessions, 6 books by Latinx poets, as one of 6 poetry collections that, quote, enlarge the poetic landscape and expand Latinx and Latin American linguistic and geographical boundaries in Harvard Review. It's also been called a profound collection full of wisdom, thanks to Lima's singular vision and voice in Chicago Reader's Best Chicago Books of 2021. You just have to go to Ananda's website to see just how many reviews this book has gotten. And I'm sure you've seen on social media how many readings that she's done, but we booked this over a year ago. So we're very happy to finally be able to hear from her. Rigoberto Gonzalez wrote, in Ananda Lima's luminous debut, the cultural landscape stretches vertically from the bustling US cities to the tropical waters of Brazil. English communes with Portuguese, shaping a language that is musical and enchanting, though not without tension. For this speaker, hard-hitting questions about homeland, nationality, and citizenship persist, as does the search for home. Motherland gives breath to the immigrants' bittersweet songs about what is gained with migration and what is lost, what can be recovered and what will remain out of reach. Please help me welcome Ananda Lima.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. That was so lovely. You know, I was like, you sometimes get nervous with these things, right? And I had forgotten about being nervous because I was so captured by, Michael's beautiful, gorgeous reading. But now with this introduction, I'm like, oh my God. So that was great. It's wonderful and such an honor to be reading with Michael and Richie. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I'm going to start with some poems that are not. I love seeing Jennifer with the phone. It's so great. I'm going to start with some poems that are not in the collection because I've been reading. It's been really great. I've been reading the book a lot, so I'll start with some new ones just to sort of shake it up, even for me, or if anybody has been to the other readings, and then I'll switch to the collection. The first one I'll share the screen. So it just while I see, let's see. No, I don't want to share the desktop. Let me open because who knows what is in there. Let me try again. There you go. I'm a very distracted person. Can you see a picture? Yes. Okay, great. So this first poem is a Necrastic Piece, and it was written after this picture. So the photographer that took this awesome picture that I love, B.A. Van Size, he was in touch with a bunch of different poets, and he said, choose from this set. And I looked and I loved so many of those, but this one, it stuck to my mind for several days. So I chose it. And, there's so many things that I love about it. But after looking at it for a while, I realized that it reminded me of this, which was really lovely, especially in the context of the pandemic, of touching and all this stuff. So this is the origin of the poem. And I will also have the screen share just for the poem because it has a visual in it. And I love that there's a delivery, so some echoes from Michael's reading. So that was great. And it's called Delivery. On the photograph, I see what I was not seeking. God in the outstretched arm, the reach, the almost touch. I can almost remember how it was, almost all of us together in hunger for each other. Parto is the noun for delivery in Portuguese, as in child, not pastrami sandwich. At the center of the frame, almost turning the corner, I see her hungry, like God hungers for giving his languid creation breath. In her cloud, halo, drapery of stickers, she stretching, he masked in her likeness. Parto is also a verb, to leave in the first person or to divide. God knows what it's like to be lonely too. All right. Very good. Okay, I think I successfully got out of that. Good. So the next poem I'm going to read is also a kind of a pandemic poem, and it came out. It just came out this week, and it's part of a project where somebody, Safia Jama, is in this project with me as well as many wonderful people. And I remember I went to her reading there in person with Rachel Haddis, which was wonderful. So it's nice to have this connection. And this one I wrote, when right after the vaccine was sort of getting widely distributed, and then we had the summer, and the beginning of the summer, the numbers were down in New York City. It was just a very hopeful time, I think. And this I wrote when I first, I don't know, got out in public, I guess, and we had driven to Queens from Chicago. So it's called Return, which also has echoes with the reading. I have the line like, stop, stop, return from Michael's reading. So Return. And just like that, I am back where it used to be, home, the skyline of New York City, the East River underneath, like the next line in a poem. I am here with my son again, with so many people, masked, unmasked, masks dangling from their ears, baby blue, paper white, returning soft serve, rainbow sprinkles, food trucks, children, tourists, us tourists. He doesn't remember here, doesn't know that self, that baby I love, that baby still him. Like I am, still me, here and superposed elsewhere, like words like here, like now, written, then read. Now here I am, if so I am in Queens. I am still Lake Michigan, Vitória da Conquista, Bahia, Itabuna, Ilhéus, the Dunes, Swanee, and still in my apartment, April 2020, fearful and hungry for this. Queens, I press enter, return to a new line. I am the baby my mother knows. I am the mother gone and unknowable in the old yellowing photograph. I am home in Queens. I tell him, this place is also yours. Here you put a rock in your mouth. Here you stumbled your first steps over gravel. Here you came out of the house the first time, newborn. All right. That was Return. And now I'm going to read a poem. So this Saturday is going to be 100 years of the Brazilian um, week of modern art. I have to translate in my head, which was a very, very big movement in Brazilian art. And I'm talking about it on Saturday, so I've been thinking about it the whole week. So I remembered this poem. And this poem also, the title is a line of Sandra Lim's poem. And I remember Sandra Lim came up in the pre-Zoom chat, which is kind of fun. So it's called Every Moon, and it has a lot of Portuguese, this one, so it's mixed. Every moon has so much to say as she tucks the charcoal world under her soft silver light, hushes it, rocks the tides, saves it for when it wakes. Usu, usal, usal, the translation of a whistle. Parachi, pararachi, boom, hips, hopping, hoovering. Who is the question? Onde anda Andrade, andrógeno, anthropo in an atrium? Or na Clarice, tossing, sweating in self-consumption, is the question to or not to? Or is it how often does your body bleed? All right, so that was the celebration of 100 years of the modern art. And one thing that I've been thinking about related to this Brazilian modern art context is that when you travel, when I'm in Brazil, I feel like I'm from this region and not from this other region. And when you travel, the whole country becomes your thing. So both in the way that you others see you, but also yourself, you kind of feel some ownership of stories and places that not necessarily yours when you're there. And this poem I wrote after there was a very terrible disaster where a giant river got completely destroyed by a leakage. And I was in New York at the time. It's called, in Brazil, the disaster. Sitting by the Hudson. Rio was never home until I got far enough for home to expand into a whole country. Before then, it was just river in the beginning of a sentence or in front of a proper name, like Doce. And here Doce was then just water flowing through a valley covered with, if not milk, honey. And if not the honey implied in its name, it was home. If not for me, then for the men of Mariana, I sit crying on a screen. All right. So now I'm going to read some of the poems, go more into the collection. So this first poem I'm going to read, I read it a lot because I feel like it's a very good representation of different threads and things that are very present in the collection. And it's called Line. I inherited from my mother the knobbly joints and square ends of my fingers. From my father, I got the habit of biting my nails. Their shortness, the frayed missing skin had never bothered me. But now I have a son, and he has begun to bite too. In America, I learned that I can snap a rubber band against my wrist each time my hand reaches up toward the mouth. On the back of my hand, the rubber band disappears into the color of my skin, but when I turn and face the inner side, it is a clear division of my body. The first time I saw a cotton tree, I found it beautiful. The cotton, so white in its brown cradle, so soft against the square tips of my fingers. I squeezed the dead flower around it and felt joy from hearing it crackle. As children, we had cups full of sugarcane. We chewed on it and spit out the bagasse. Toothless men ran the knobbly stalks through a machine. The juice trickled into our glasses, and the flat piece that came out on the other side was put through it again until everything was gone. The dry split stalk thrown into a pile, limp, like blonde hair. When I first arrived in America, I didn't understand what people meant when they said with an American accent that they were Irish or Italian or French. Now that I understand, I asked my mother for a family tree. She said she had never thought of such things, and she wouldn't know much past her grandmother's first name. So what I have is my memories of the faces of my relatives and my own. When I first arrived in America, all I could see was beauty. The snow, fine like sugar, white like cotton, but now the beauty, the land, the tired metaphors just make me sad. Before I left for America, I saw an individual in the mirror. But today, I see my father, my mother, my brothers, my son, and a man missing skin from tears on his back, and the man who did it. When I looked this morning, I tugged on my rubber band so hard that it broke. All right. So now I'll read another poem that I think it's kind of like a sister poem to that poem. I feel like they're kind of the same thing, but they're different. And this one, as a background, it refers, I wrote it after I went to a party and we were talking about the letter A, as one does in parties. And somebody was talking about how the letter A, it came from the a head of an ox or a cow, you know? And that was great. But when I was walking home, I was thinking, you know, my family in Brazil, they're from the Northeast, where the big historical tragedy of that region is drought. And the symbol usually is, you know, a skeleton, a skull of a cow on a cracked soil. So I'm walking, I'm thinking of my name with the three heads kind of staring at me. And that's, after that, I wrote this poem. Arroyo. They say the first letter of my name evolved from a picture of a carcass, a cabeça de vaca sem as suas costelas expostas like claws or jaws, ancient. My neighbor says not to let my son sleep on my bed, but I do. I know the terror, cold sweat whispering on the heat of our necks. At night, we're haunted by my great-great-great-grandparents, dried on cracked soil, beating in the cold of my feet, the bahia and the bones they inhabit on my bed. In America, I learned that arroyos are paths carved by the rain, but I already knew. At night, the cracked soil calls for me, as cabeças de vaca of my greats, calling and calling. I tell them, I don't know you, but I do. The city spine is a split bifurcation solidified in calcium. In America, they eat the bagasse of oranges and say my name means bliss. I am in love with bone-white concrete. The spine of the city sits fleshless and free of scales, flexible bones that can bend and keep bending and keep bending and bending right up until they snap. All right, good. So I'll read another one. I'll get out of the collection for this one. This one's also during the pandemic. I did a lot of very isolated camping, and we kind of went many places. It was sad, but also magical. And this one is called Postcard. Postcard. You speak to a mountain by becoming it. Your body, in her language of minerals, a whisper, a hummingbird's fluttering wings. Since I became a mother nearly a decade ago, my body smells like milk. Women tend to live longer, but I, selfish as I can be, wish never to be without you. In the language of mountains, heavy water and debris say the Grand Canyon. I am happy now. Now, just another place. From here, I can send you this whenever you are, as easily as a love letter, a postcard without a return address. All right. All right. So this next one is part of a series that I have a chapbook on it, but I think it's going to become much bigger on vision. So I have amblyopia, which is just lazy eye, and I have it very mildly, but my son has it in a very severe way, and it caused all sorts of issues for him that I don't have, which is very complicated. And on top of that, the language is very poetic of the whole conversation on this, because it's about the two eyes converging, and it sort of works with my bilingual work very well. So it's kind of, there's a lot in there. So I'll read one of those, and it's called Amblyopia. I close my right eye, meu olho direito, and see everything. Tudo que my mother, my father, meus pais didn't know to do then. Not a matter of laziness, the doctor says. It's more of a suppression, a lack of focus. Think of the right eye as a bully. Think of the left eye as too weak to fight. Think of the two eyes unable to work right together. And I was left, grown, done with the plasticity of a body that is still building. A give said not to last, and I was left with a speckled Super 8, the grainy film, the faint dark surface of an old mirror. All right, there's amblyopia. And let me see, I'll do, since we're talking about vision, I'll read this poem, and either this or the next, either this is the last one or the second last one. We'll see how it goes. But this one, do you remember the Great American Eclipse? I don't know if anybody got a chance to look at it, but I remember at the time, it's gonna be the last one. I was very, I don't know, grumpy about the whole thing. And I remember talking to a receptionist at some point, like at the doctor's office. We're like, these people have too much time. Trump is around. Like, what are people like going on about this eclipse? So it was very cynical. But when it happened, I sort of melted. It was just so gorgeous. It's very, very moving. So this is the poem, Eclipse. Oh, and it's plays with Ben Lerner's poem that plays with Lorca's poem. Under the arc of celestial bodies in their trivial dance, eyes naked, I yawned and kept moving, unmoved by their movement. Then I looked down at a crack on the sidewalk and saw the sun-dappled light bent into the shape of the moon by the moon, asserting herself in the sky on the ground. I imagined the moon could see me, imagined I was the moon seeing me, small, looking down at her, trying in vain to eclipse her. I, so small in the sidewalk, surrounded by 1,000 seas. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ananda. That was so beautiful. It was so nice to finally hear you read from this book, which I read in one sitting when you sent it to me. It's such a beautiful book. Again, if you don't have these books, please please do order them. Tomorrow you'll get an email if you can't jot it down now. Sophia always sends you a nice thank you email with beautiful, easy to click on links. So you can wait to order them till tomorrow. Thank you so much, Ananda. And now we have Richie Hoffman. His new book, please hold it up for us, Richie. His new book, 100 Lovers, has been called an erotic journal in poems from a rising star in the poetry scene, or as I like to call him, a Cavafy for our times. It was published by Knopf just yesterday, I am still waiting to receive my copy, but I know from everyone's exuberant posts on Twitter that it has the most gorgeous lavender end papers. Richie is the author of Second Empire that came out in 2015, and his poetry recently appeared in the New Yorker, the New York Review of Books, and the Yale Review. He studied with Eben Boland and Louise Glick, and now he teaches at Stanford University. Two of our friends at the center, Jericho Brown and Garth Greenwell, wrote really gorgeous blurbs for the book. So I'm going to read them to you. Jericho Brown writes, a book of love poems that consciously and subversively harken back to Shakespeare's sonnets, marking Hofmann's position as one of our necessary poets of erotic desire. These short lyrics come together in their discussion of geography, painting, sculpture, and classical music, as if to say that love, that queer love, is indeed as immortal as a poem. Or as Hofmann himself writes, there is so much to say, it may take until night. And Garth Greenwell says, this is a book you take in with your feeling body. It's full of textures and scents, redolent with music and art. The speaker of these poems, hungry for beauty and brutality, seeks out connection while haunted by the inviolable singleness of self. One finds an almost lost tradition channeled in these brilliant poems, and also a sensibility that makes tradition startlingly new. Please help me welcome Richie Hoffman.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me okay? You hear me? Yeah. It's great to be here virtually and to read with Michael and Ananda. And I'm very grateful to Jennifer and Sophia and the Hudson Valley Writers Center. I taught a weekend workshop a couple of weeks ago, and I was very nervous for it. I mean, you never know how these things are going to go. And it ended up being truly the highlight of the new year for me. I loved every minute of it. And thank you all for being here. You're really sweet to tune in. I'm in a hotel room. I'm on my way to Skidmore College. And even in 2022, it takes 5 days of travel to get there. So I'm in the hotel using an ironing board as a desk, trying to be resourceful. I'm reading from the new book, 100 Lovers. I'm so grateful to my editor, Deborah Garrison, for taking a chance on this strange sexual book. And she and her team at Knopf have made it into such an object of profound beauty. Not just this gorgeous cover, but the type is so beautiful also. That even, I think, if you totally hate the poems, it's still worth having just as an art piece. I'll read a suite of love poems, not for Valentine's Day, but because they're all I have. History of pleasure. I walked by myself to the market, past ruins with broken bodies of stone, where even a fragment of a man could undo me. I bought herbs wrapped in paper. Light shone through the glass of our apartment. You had been showering. The smell of mint invaded the room. Your hair was wet. Spring wedding. The day before we married, we napped in the afternoon with no sheets over us, and felt the breeze from the lake on our backs and butts and legs. It felt different, a small rebellion, though we've slept in one another's arms for 10 years, like little beasts, vulnerable and hairy, with saliva on our skin. The next day, we were men again. Ironed shirts, knotted ties of silk, deodorant, parted hair, promises. We will have children. We will buy another house. One of us will get cancer. All of our parents will die. A friend of mine asked if they could read that at their wedding, but thought their parents would be too freaked out by it. The Romans. It doesn't take long to find a new lover. He takes a Polaroid of me on the steps of the chapel. My eyes are full of him. My fingernails blue from putting my hands in my jeans. He shakes the photo with 2 fingers. The sun uglies me. He leaves it on the table of candles where others place coins and roses. When he grabs me by the hair and shouts into my mouth, a pearlescent filament is strung between his body and mine. I wake up on a crisp afternoon in November with things to buy: cheese and apples, Chenin Blanc, flowers. This poem is crude, but it's based on a true story. The Fables. In school, we read a ridiculous story by Aesop, one not involving wise or foolish animals or insects, but one in which a god allocates emotions to the parts of the body, intellect to the mind, love to the heart, etc., etc., until only the asshole is left, to which the god assigns shame. Understandably, shame is unhappy with the accommodations. But it's too late. Shame curses. If Eros should ever seek to occupy that place, I will leave the body for good. This is why homosexuals have no shame, according to Aesop, or one of his Victorian translators. According to me, this is why there is no moral order to my sexual imagination, and why praising my looks and hair and white flesh as I lie with you, then falling silent for days at a time, you really are the master of my pain. Quail. He addressed me as my quail, my sweet quail. He was easy to obey. It was a year ago in Connecticut. I remember the middle of his body, the beach, a hollowed out tree in the sand, changing leaves, the parking lot of a senior citizen's home. When will I see him again? I asked myself while I was with him, taking off my socks in the sand. And again the next day, when I wasn't, and the day after that, and the day I woke up and there was snow on the tennis courts. This is a poem about falling in love with a singer, a bass. German cities. Next week, he will be away auditioning. Stuttgart, Frankfurt, Hamburg, Berlin. We talk about music, style, discipline, the great composers. He sings and speaks with the voice of a priest, father, or devil. I pull on my jeans. In my pocket, the department store's strip of paper sprayed with cologne. The garden that enters the room is the garden of a childhood in Munich. The naked old men who smoked along the banks of the river are dead now. My pocket smells of masculine lavender. Well, you try to be inspired by everything around you. Well, I really hate nightlife. I just don't ever need to go out that night. But friends drag you from time to time and you have to go. And I wrote a poem about it called Underground. My friend paid a little money. We waited outside above the stifling staircase. A muscled boy danced foolishly. Music pulsed through a window. A $400 puppy mask, light on our foreheads, the glasses sweating. His husband off to the toilets to snort cocaine. The room was full of shapes. I wanted to feel tenderness, but the love everyone was seeking, I already owned. All Sunday, I was like a baby with a long memory, not able to touch or kiss anyone in the long twin bed. with the lace coverlet. I'll end with two love poems. The first is called You Couldn't Lose Me. It was like waking up in California, the awkward blossoms, the sky an aggressive blue. I remember the smell from your armpits, the greenhouse windows covered in white paint, where the air was heavy, the silver weeds, a small herd of farm animals at the agricultural college wore the field to dust. The wind was hot and fresh on our faces. The donkey looked so dumb trying to walk. It was simple. Beneath your shirt was skin. I remember that first year, pulling your briefs from the hamper. I met my husband in college, and I was living in this terrible dorm called La Maison Française, where we were all supposed to speak French at all times. And so no one ever spoke. And I had the opportunity recently to go back to that place with Ryan. It's no longer La Maison Française. Some more important major has taken hold of this brownstone in Boston. French novel. You were my second lover. You had dark eyes and hair like a painting of a man. We lay on our stomachs, reading books in your bed. I emailed my professor. I will be absent from French novel due to sickness. You put on some piano music. Even though it was winter, we had to keep the window open day and night. The room was so hot, the air so dry, it made our noses bleed. With boots, we trekked through slush. For a bottle of red wine, we weren't allowed to buy. Our shirts unbuttoned under our winter coats. The French language distinguishes between the second of two and the second of many. Of course, we'd have other lovers. Snow fell in our hair. You were my second lover. Another way of saying this, you were the other, not another.
So gorgeous, so beautiful. Thank you so much for this reading to all of you. We've been talking in the chat. This was also a masterclass at how to read your work. Really wonderful readings. And I know Michael is an actor, so that's not surprising that he's a really good reader of his work, but the three of you, what a really wonderful way to hear your work, even if we've already read it online or in your books. We always start the Q&A by asking advice for our students. We have a lot of students who are working on their first chapbooks or their first full-length collections. And we would just love to hear some of your thoughts on maybe advice that you've gotten from your teachers that has really resonated and helped you, and advice that you give to your students.
I'll start just to start. I think at different points I would give different advice, but what is coming to me now is to be not hard on yourself. Like life is hard enough, and be doing having a career of any sort is hard enough. So I think being kind to yourself, you can see things that can be improved and see things you want to achieve without being negative. So I ask people to think of somebody else they really like and how would they talk to them. If your inner voice is not nice to yourself yet, think of talking to other people that you may nurture yourself in that way. And I think that is both during the writing and also with submitting and sending stuff, nurture yourself.
Well, I think it's helpful. It's been helpful for me to get into the rhythm of writing as frequently as I can, to be able to kind of be living inside of that like kind of space of poetic creation, to write a lot. I don't know, that's always my advice, to write as much as you can. I mean, so much gets in the way, but there's nothing more amazing than when you're in the zone and making things. And in terms of putting, a chapbook together or something, my advice is always to cut everything, to be extremely ruthless with yourself. And, if you can write 90 pages and make it 40, I don't know, creation by subtraction is kind of my method. A bigger draft that becomes smaller, or a big messy pile of poems that then you get to kind of chisel away again and again and again until something really pure and special reveals itself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think of something that Laurie Anderson said in a recent lecture on Zoom that she was giving, and she does all of these amazing Zoom backgrounds, and she was quoting one of her mentors and who advised their students to, can you just stop take art and world out of the equation and just do, just do your work, suspend judgment for as long as possible. And I think that I don't teach poetry, I teach filmmakers and actors. Some of them want to write poetry. It's a nice surprise when they want to. But I think there's such a tendency to kind of self-censor these days, to be really afraid of saying the thing that's not even going to get you canceled, but is going to somehow make you temporarily, or permanently a pariah. So I think I think a kind of a, you know, a solitude is so important, and a sort of a freedom from outside judgment, you know, to say this is what I need to write. If nobody ever finds value in it, or I never show it to anybody, it doesn't matter.
Thank you so much for those answers. We got a question in the chat asking about what it's like to read work that you quote unquote finished a long time ago. And how does that experience compare to reading more current work or even work in progress?
That is a great question. I don't know how to answer it. It all feels like an out-of-body experience, I think. I think reading is such a strange thing, but it's such a wonderful thing to be here. I actually like reading on Zoom. It's the strangest thing. I don't really feel a difference between reading older and newer work. I think what really matters is just sort of, you know, being in the moment, feeling your audience. And, you know, I think what Richie said earlier is, you know, like, I wish I'd learned that lesson more, you know, cut. I'm not as ruthless as I should be, but you're always going to see something that you know, you're like, oh, I could change that. But in the end, I think it's almost all like, okay, I have to abandon this. I have to read it, because the sooner I can finish reading it, I can get on to writing something else that I can later transform.
I love that question, and I love that answer. That was so great. You know, I got so many readings organized in a small space of time. So I was reading a lot, and lots of Zooms. So I was like, okay, who is here this time? It just became impossible to find the intersection. So I kind of disconnected and said, here's what I have. You know, that was a good process. But for me, a lot of times, because I'm so not an actor. I admire actors so much because I think it's just so magical what you do. I early on understood that I cannot, I just have to read the way I read, and I trip over a lot and I get nervous or whatever. That's just the way I can do it. And I connect with the work. So if it's a poem that I have read many times, I just try to sort of pay attention to it again and listen to what I'm saying. And I think that usually works for me, and therefore works for the audience a little better. Newer work, I think it's similar. I do think that sometimes when you read the poem a lot, especially for me, because I trip up so much, it becomes a little easier, just the rhythm, you know, you learn the muscle of where to breathe or or whatever. That was a great question.
Did you want to answer that one, Richie, or?
Oh, well, I would just add that, I don't know, it's always especially fun to read something that's very new to you. And a reading, I feel like, is a good opportunity to hear, you know, to have it in the world. Like, what's the worst that can happen, right? It kind of exists in the air. I guess things are recorded now, so I take it back. But the idea that it just kind of exists in the air and people can kind of take it with them, but it's not, you know, fixed to a page, and therefore you can feel more promiscuous with it.
I think that it's very exciting for us that your book just came out yesterday. We don't often get to time things this perfectly, so it's really exciting to have you reading it when it's brand new. We have a great trio of questions from Michael. Michael Quachon asks if Michael could say a bit about acting and poetry and how they live together in your imagination. Did one lead to the other? Yeah. And then maybe we'll let Michael do that, and I'll ask Ananda her question from Michael after that, and then Richie. Go ahead, Michael.
Oh, that's a wonderful question. And I think they're really very, very close to each other. I mean, I feel almost like the impulse to write a poem for me comes in, the same way as wanting to work on a character or to be involved in, there is obviously more, I think, solitude when you're writing a poem or you're working on it, you're living with it. But at the same time, I think there's still this sense of wanting to make an arc, wanting to share with somebody how a mood changes over the course of a given moment, and wanting to make that, a hunger for listeners, for good audiences. I think they're very much connected. And I think also, like, paradoxically, I think most of the actors I know are really incredibly shy, being an extrovert is in itself a kind of act or something you have to overcome. I really would like, I have a great friend at NYU who's somehow able to memorize her poems and recite them so well. And I really would like to learn how to do that, at some point. So thank you for that question.
Yeah, that's a great question, Michael. Have you ever heard Alice Oswald recite her poems?
Oh,
She
yeah.
memorizes all of them too. And not to
Beautiful.
plug a reading that's not affiliated with the Hudson Valley Writers Center, but she will be reading on Zoom on the 24th of April, and she's just one of our favorites. So tune into that if you can, to hear her reading weather poems from her anthology. But we also have amazing things going on in April, so check out our schedule. Michael's question for Ananda is, do you dream, think, write in English or Portuguese or both? And how do you choose which language to use for your poems? And when you grade it, how do you choose to do that?
I love that question. It's something that sometimes I don't know, but I think mostly because I'm living here and I've been away for so long. When I am here, it's all mostly in English, except for when you think of like a specific subject matter, where the words are trapped in there. So it's like a fun, interesting process to just answer that question for myself. It's like how are things frozen in there, that it calls for the Portuguese. If I go and spend a long time in Brazil, that rarely happens, but I had a time recently where I spent like a month in Portugal and a month in Brazil. Then I started writing Portuguese again. So I think it's very much what's around you, and then memory brings those things. But in poetry, I do it a little bit more purposefully, because I'm very much playing with that idea of the bilingual poem and translations and adding and how to have the two languages together. I have a lot of that in Motherland, and when I started doing the Amblyopia stuff, which is about two eyes that can't converge into an image, and that's what you're trying to make them do with vision therapy and stuff, then I really started getting into how to have the two languages coexist. So I love playing with it in a formal level. I would use repeating forms, and instead of having a repetition, I'll have a very loose translation. I will use things that don't have a form. I will pay attention to like cognates and false cognates. So for me, that is a very productive area of investigation. So I love that question because I'm very actively interested in that question too.
And then I can't believe how fast this has gone. Our last question for Richie, from Michael: what do you teach? How are our young literature students doing these days? And how does your writing and teaching compete or collaborate with each other?
Well, teaching is really my passion. I mean, I feel as called to it as I am to writing. I love doing it. the students are, I mean, the literature students are doing well. I mean, they teach me so much. You know, I'm not such an old person, but I'm usually the oldest person in the rooms that I'm in very often. And they, you know, they have new ideas and they, you know, are constantly, you know, pushing me and making me see things in a new way. And that's a privilege. It's a chance to get to do all the time what I love to do with my own writing, which is to kind of see it in progress, imagine possibilities for it, imagine directions it might go, suggest authors who might unlock something. I mean, I feel like I get, you know, the thing that I love to do to my own poems, I get to do for everyone else's in some sense, and to see them kind of become part of each student's life, and to see where the poems take them and what teaches them about themselves is a great passion of mine.
Well, thank you all so much for being here. Congratulations to the three of you on your wonderful books and all of the accolades that you've gotten. Really happy for all of you. And please do come back to teach for us. Richie loves teaching the Odes class. We'd love to have you back. Michael and Ananda, we'd love to have you on our schedule. And we will send you the chat. We will send you the link for the video when it's up. And please send me your snail mail addresses so we can get you your honorarium sent to you tomorrow. Thank you all for being here. As always, you're the best audience in poetry. We love you, and we'll see you on February 23rd for Adamara James, reading with Douglas Kearney and Cindy Beach. So we'll really look forward to seeing you all back for that. Thank you all so much, and good night.